Hi, I'm Alex. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. I'm a 23-year-old data analyst, lives in the greater New York City area. I love Disney, and I'm a big reader. So today we're going to be talking about books that I've rated 5 stars. I've been reading a lot since I was like 3 or 4. It started with my dad would read to me before I went to bed, and then he would have me read back to him, and that was how I got to get through books. So I've been reading for a very long time and I love it, but I decided to sit down and find out what books that I've rated 5 stars throughout time after seeing a lot of these videos on YouTube. So today we're going to talk about mine. I'm going to start with the books that I currently have physical copies of, and then all the other ones I'll insert pictures of later. First is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book is like an enemies to lovers about 2 authors who went to college together, and they find themselves living next door to each other in this small, quaint town. And it's a very interesting story of what happens. There is romance in this, but there's also a lot more, including like talk about cults. So it's a very interesting book. I would highly recommend it if you've never read it. And I'm excited to read the rest of Emily Henry's books. The next one is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. I know that this has been a pretty big book this year, and I believe this was big on BookTube. Same thing with Beach Read, but this is about a girl who has her whole life planned out, and she is engaged to this guy who she thinks is going to be her perfect like match, and she has this vision of something that happens in the future of her being with another man, puts off planning her wedding, and it just like ruins her whole life. But this book I had to read in almost one sitting. I think I did the first like 3 chapters and then did the rest in one sitting because I just needed to get to the end. But this book I thought was absolutely phenomenal. If you're in a reading slump or you don't like reading, start here because it's so good. The next one I've heard very mixed reviews on. I know some people really love it and some people really don't. And that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. When I posted asking what I should read next, and this was one of the options, I got like 20 DMs about how boring this book is, how it's not good, etc. I loved this book. It reminded me a lot of reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Just because you're in the deep south, you're reading a lot of that like southern speak, the southern dialect of the less like educated people, which is very interesting to me. But this is about a girl who lives in like a swamp basically, and her whole family leaves her and she's left to fend for herself at the age of 7. So this is definitely a really good read and I would recommend it, but be warned that a lot of people I've talked to about it do think this book is incredibly boring. The next book on this list, and it's not my most recent book that I finished, but I finished it like 5 or 6 days ago, is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know Taylor Jenkins Reid is a huge like author right now. Malibu Rising, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, she's everywhere, but this book I loved. So I actually bought this for a friend and I was reading it to vet it before I gave it to her to make sure it was good. And I am obsessed with it. It's about the story of Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks, and they're called Daisy Jones and the Six here, but it reads interview style. So you're listening to each member of the band give their point of view on events as if they're talking to an interviewer, which they are. So that book was amazing, and I've also heard that the audiobook is really good. If you're watching me, I'm assuming you've probably watched Steph Borer before if you're watching one of my big book videos, and she said that the audio book was absolutely incredible, and I can see how that would be true because you have so many different characters, so many different voices, so many different things to portray, and I feel like that would be incredible. But this book definitely makes my 5-star list. The next book I don't physically have, so I will insert a picture of it, is Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Wicked is one of the longest books I've ever read. It's like 895 pages or something. It's very long, and it is what the Broadway musical is based off of. So if you've seen Wicked, then maybe consider reading the book. I think that the book was a lot better than the show, and I saw the show once, and then I read the book, and then I saw the show 3 more times, and every time I don't know. I wish they had included parts of the book in the show. They don't stick to everything in the storyline. Obviously they want to make it more entertaining for an audience, but it's not what was originally written. So if you have the time to read an 895 page book, I would definitely recommend picking up Wicked. It's amazing. There is a slow part of it where they talk about all of the history and the actual like background of things, and that part is a little bit slow, but it is interesting to learn about. The next book on my 5-star list is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Probably one of the most basic books to be on a 5-star list ever. It's about this man who lives next door to Jay Gatsby, and it tells the story of his life. If you haven't heard of The Great Gatsby, I feel like you might live under a rock, but definitely such a good book. If you are not a reader, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio is also pretty good. The next book on my 5-star list is Into the Wild by John Krakauer, which is about a man who goes to live in Alaska on his own, and as the title would suggest, he's in the wild, and it tells the story of him giving up his family's money, selling all of his belongings, hitchhiking across the US into Alaska, and his adventures. And I read this in high school, and I didn't think I was gonna like it because I'm not a nonfiction gal, but it ended up being one of my absolute favorite books. Book number 8 on my 5-star list is Orphan Train by Christine Baker Klein. This is a book about a little girl who is in foster care, or she's in an orphanage, and she gets put on a train and brought through the country where people who are looking to adopt can go choose their child out of a lineup. So this little girl gets picked by a family of farmers. She's basically used for labor on the farm and tries to develop a life out of it. I think this is one of the best books I've ever read. I read it while I was studying abroad. It took me little to no time to get through, and I thought that it was incredible. So it definitely ends up on my 5-star list. The next book on my list is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This book is very controversial. It is on the American Library Association's list of the top 100 like banned and challenged books since it came out. It's a dystopian novel, which are sort of, I think, my favorite, honestly. Similar to 1984, except you're organized by your intelligence. So the society is a social hierarchy that is intelligence-based, and the book is the story of somebody trying to challenge that. And it reads very similarly to 1984, except I think it has a bit more of a storyline. It talks more about the technology that they were predicting and like medications, and it actually predicted a lot of things correctly, which is kind of crazy. So if you haven't read this book, I definitely recommend reading it, even though it is a little controversial, because I think it's very good. Book number 10 is Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Again, another very controversial book. The first time I read this book, I absolutely hated it. The second time, I thought it was okay, and the third time, I loved it. And I think the reason I hated it at first was because I didn't fully understand. And then once I talked through it with teachers and peers over the years, the book grew on me a lot more. If you haven't read it or haven't heard of it, it's about a young man who has kind of a psychotic break and ends up like moving to New York City and doing a lot of crazy things. This book has been said to be the reason why the person who shot John Lennon shot him. So it's very interesting, and I guess it can affect you a lot. The next book is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is another book that's on a lot of banned and challenged lists. The book where they're burning all of these books because they don't want people to have that education. They want them to learn purely what they're being taught. It reminds me a lot of when I was reading 1984. I thought a lot about Fahrenheit 451 because it's all about government control of your thought. And if you can't read to develop your own opinions, these particular books, then you won't act out against your government. So that's what Fahrenheit 451 is. I think it's a great book, even though, again, it is a bit controversial. Next book is Animal Farm. This is another one that's probably considered controversial, and we're just talking about a lot of dystopian novels at once here. Like I said, I think they're my favorite, but Animal Farm is a satirical allegory. It's actually a novella, so it's shorter than like most books. Animal Farm is about a bunch of animals who rebel against their farmer, and they are trying to form this perfect utopia, but as you see in most dystopian novels, a utopia is not possible. So what ends up happening is all of these animals need a leader, they need some structure, and a pig who is called Napoleon conveniently ends up being the dictator of the farm. So if you're somebody who's into political theory, this book is awesome for you. If you're somebody who's really not, maybe this book will make you interested. I studied political science in college, so that may be why these dystopian novels are so interesting to me. It's because I did a lot of work on political theory, but I really enjoyed this book. The next book that's on my list, I've never seen the 5-star video, I've never seen the book recommendation video, and it might be for a younger audience. We have a guest. It might be for a younger audience. I read this in middle school, but I love it just the same and the idea of it now. So the book Elsewhere by Gabrielle Zevin, it's about a 17-year-old girl who gets hit by a car and dies, and she goes to this place called Elsewhere, and in Elsewhere she is able to watch back on her life and watch everybody around her, and she watches like her family and friends grieve, but she's trying to figure out who killed her. And in Elsewhere you age backwards, back down to 0, and then you're reborn. That's the idea of the book. So she eventually needs to learn to enjoy her time there and meets people and makes friends, but it's a very interesting concept. So I put that on my personal 5-star list. I read it in 2009 and I'm still thinking about it in 2021, and I still recommend it to people, so I definitely think that's a good choice. And there's Tell Me Lies by Carola Lovering. It's number 14. It's about a woman who dates this man in college, and they lie to each other a lot, but it goes back and forth between her perspective, his perspective. It switches timelines occasionally. It's very interesting. It changed the way that I looked at writing as somebody who aspires to publish their own novel one day, and I absolutely love this book. It's one of my favorites. The last book is Little Fires Everywhere. It's a contemporary novel, meaning there's not like romance or anything in it. Little Fires Everywhere is about this family that rents out a house to people that they think are in need for a low cost of rent, and they end up hiring the mother of the family as their like cleaner and to help cook, so she can make more money. She's an aspiring photographer and only like brings in money occasionally, and there's a lot of drama in this book, so I would definitely recommend you read it. I'm gonna end this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my 5-star books. If you have any book recommendations for me, please leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.